There are some famous, renowned theologians. They said if Jesus would encounter Christianity 150 years after his crucifixion, he would not recognize it. Can we say the same about the Buddha? If he would encounter the teaching, his teaching, 200 or 250 years after his parinibbana, would he recognize it? We can say quite surely he would very much recognize it, but he would probably give some comments, quite a big Dhamma talk, I can imagine, to put the balance of the teaching back as it was in his time. So, Buddha versus Theravada. That's the provocative title of this talk. And I will not elaborate about the later developments of Buddhism like Mahayana, Zen, Vajrayana, Amitabha. No. Specifically focused on the 2 first centuries after Buddha's parinibbana. Because this is not directly recorded. And there is quite some vagueness about this time. Because what we have is Tipitaka. Tipitaka is the Pali canon canonized at the Ashoka time. That was the 3rd council in Pataliputta, where 3 collections of material of the text have been canonized as the Buddha's teaching. But still, this is about 250 years after Buddha's parinibbana, this council. There has been first council in a few months after Buddha's parinibbana. This assembly of arahats was reciting what was remembered, and it was very important, putting the knowledge together. Venerable Ananda exulting with his memory. But, what the Buddha said during 45 years of his mission could not be recorded, really. Everything. There have been no recording devices, no microphones. So we don't have everything, that's clear. And if we look at the situation some 200, 300 years after parinibbana, there have been already 18 schools of Buddhist teaching, diversification. I can imagine each monk has got something through the recitation, through the oral tradition, through the repetition of the suttas, but certainly not everything. And of course, everybody has its own way of understanding these things. Like in my case, I encountered Buddha's teaching in the books, and my knowledge of German and English language was just beginning. I was just beginning, and having an anthology of the suttas in German and in English, translating it with dictionary, this difficult language, you look a word in a dictionary and you get 4 or 5 possible meanings. And if you look how problematic is to translate Pali, the original language, into the Western languages, lots of fuzziness. And so I put my own understanding into that, what I could understand and imagine. And of course, actually, the original inspiration came from a Czech book. I am Czech by birth, so it's my mother language. I could understand everything in that book. That opened up my spiritual awakening, seeing that this life and this world is not at all the the scope of the real problem, that is this endlessness of samsara, the rebirth and different spheres of existence, and the blindness of the humans. So that was the initial inspiration, but that was just a general information, and the kind of a image how to practice and what to practice, and so I got from these anthologies. There have been Mahasatipatthana Sutta there, so that was the good support for my practice. But of course, lots of vagueness around all these lines and translations. So I read these things a little bit like a poesy, that you are not going for the literal meaning, but you are inspiring yourself by the lines, and you put your kind of understanding into that. And of course, I put the most excellent, most beautiful kind of liberating practice and the aim into my inspiration. So, with this kind of inspiration, that was the first meditation in the mountains. I was only doing anapanasati, and it worked miraculously, really. It was the most blessed and most difficult time of my life. And only this vision of the depth of the human predicament kept me through the extreme difficulties to kinds of healing which occurred during these 3 months, quite alone in the snowy mountains of Switzerland. So I can imagine that in the Buddha's time, or shortly after, also the monks just got some kind of a support. This is what the Buddha said. You can understand it in some way. You are inspired and you develop kind of progress, which is very liberating. But your colleague did something different, and he got also liberated, and different school may appear. So it is until today, actually. Different way of accentuation of some aspects of Buddha's teaching. So the 18th school, the Theravada was one of these 18. Theravada, today we regard it as the original. But we should correct this opinion. It is the oldest one. But the original is that what Buddha taught. And we don't have that. What we have is that what this third council, perhaps 250 years after Parinibbana of Buddha, was canonizing as 3 collections, let's say. And this was written down in Sri Lanka about 200 years after the Third Council. So that's about 500 years. It was kept orally, then it was written down on palm leaves. That must have been a beautiful undertaking to collect such a large volume of dry palm leaves, which probably is quite a stable material, to write about it. The shape of the leaves, certainly not A4, certainly something like that, big pile of it. Usually it was binded into books, some hard wooden desk in the front, another wooden desk in the back, and how to collect it. 3 baskets, te pitaka, 3 baskets. 1 basket for the monastic rules, 1 basket for suttas, the Buddha's utterances or discourses, and the 3rd basket for Abhidhamma. And of course it was very voluminous, so that was probably quite a big basket. So this is the history of Theravada. Now, leaving all the Mahayana, Vajrayana out of the scope for the moment, focusing on the development between the real original and that what we have today, the Theravada. Why it become so important for me? I felt some discrepancies, not in the beginning, right, but perhaps 10 years later already, quite clearly. My story goes 50 years back. I am an old Dhamma guy. But 5 years after my beginning, then we founded a Dhamma group, Bern, and we started to invite different teachers to give retreats, to give some lecture, perhaps in Bern, and also we were renting some objects and organizing retreats. We were all quite young, about 30 years of my age, and we would run our retreats program. Our retreats usually started with Easter retreat given by Ajahn Sumedho. Ajahn Sumedho was already in England. That's the beginning of Chithurst, this early time of the British Sangha, Ajahn Sumedho, which is a tradition. He was very authentically representing the Thai forest tradition, especially in the very beginning. Ajahn Sumedho at that time probably had very little knowledge about the other forms or styles of Buddhist practice. So at least in the early years, he was really representing the Thai forest tradition. And then in the summer, we would have the American teachers, mainly Joseph Goldstein. He was invited almost every year. So this was the Burmese way of presentation, let's say. And it was about the third year we succeeded to invite Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw himself. So what I want to say by that, so Ajahn Sumedho, with the forest tradition really, for me now, is more or less the representation of that what Buddha originally taught and how he taught it. The forest tradition in the West developed in these 40 years enormously. So now it is all quite a different situation. But originally, this 40 years, 30 years back, the Thai forest tradition was, according to my assessment, quite authentically representing that what Buddha originally taught and how it taught, not influenced by Abhidhamma. Because this is what is the Burmese tradition. In Burma, of course, it is the Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka, but Abhidhamma Pitaka is almost the one which got the highest respect in Burma. Thailand now also changing, but it was a long time not really relying on Abhidhamma, which is clearly later addition to the original Buddha's teaching. I did not underline, this is very important to make it clear, that Buddha did not teach Abhidhamma, even if the Burmese believe that Buddha taught Abhidhamma, that's not true. The scientific research is absolutely clear about it. The Burmese tradition explains why Buddha did not teach Abhidhamma in the earthly condition, but in the heaven. Because Abhidhamma is so subtle teaching that the humans at that time were not able to understand it. So according to this smiling tradition, Buddha spent the whole Vaso in Tavatimsa teaching Abhidhamma, but having a human body, he would descend to the earth to get Pindapat, to provide some nutriment for his human body. And Venerable Sariputta was attending to the Buddha at that time, and Buddha at that occasion would always tell a summary to Sariputta what he was teaching in the heaven. So, this is the style how the tradition tries to put things into the Buddha's mouth what he did not say. And the Mahayana is excellent, another example how to do it. But the Theravadins, they started with it. These additions to the suttas, there are here and there some later additions and modifications of even in the Sutta Pitaka. Venerable Analayo made lots of comparison with agamas, and actually his research is very important. What he found out that there is a large, we can rely on the suttas in the middle collections, in the Suttanta, that these suttas are fairly authentic, comparable with agamas, but even the agamas are a little bit later. It is not necessarily the beginning, really. Now, what I want to now specifically focus on is this development, what the Buddha originally taught and what was added quite evidently in the Abhidhamma, the whole basket of Abhidhamma text. That's a 7 books, quite voluminous. What was the reason for this enormous undertaking? Though I don't like it, I have to say, that's my personal. I don't want to discourage anybody to study Abhidhamma if you are inspired by that, of course. But I am not inspired by that. I even see a certain trap possible that because it's a brainy, you have to memorize lots of stuff. I have to say what the Abhidhamma is. Oh, how to start not to confuse it. It's quite advanced material, And I will have to start at the beginning to make it clear what and why happened. If we go to the original suttas, especially the long discourses in the Digha Nikaya, in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha usually starts his discourse, probably that was an evening talk to a large assembly, I can imagine. So he was starting with kind of things which everybody can understand, like to lead a moral life, like to see the disadvantages of a worldly life, and he would inspire people to open up their understanding of the predicament of human existence. And he would certainly inspire the people for liberation. That all these things, this worldly stuff, that it is quite a low, very low and problematic and dangerous field of existence. There are many dangers in it because, already this human existence can get quite nasty. We see it even 2,500 years later, still the same, certainly not much better. Now, but that was the beginning of his talks. And when he felt that the audience is ready, he started to give the real advanced Dhamma, especially when there were monks there. It's true that the really advanced stages of Dhamma, he would mostly teach to the monks. What is the difference? So he would speak about the 5 precepts, 8 precepts, supporting the Sangha, being generous, being good-minded, the Brahma Viharas, the loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and these things. And then the Eightfold Noble Path. So these are all elements of the teaching, perhaps even the Four Noble Truths, he would mention, which the people can understand and get motivated by that. But this is still looking from the worldly, human condition of existence, when we believe that the world is around us and I am me in the world. The perspective from the liberated perspective, the Nibbanic kind of perspective, is very different. And when Buddha starts to talk about this, so to say, from this point of vision, then he starts to talk about 5 khandhas, 5 constituents of individual existence. There is no me, no mine, no myself in it. These are just natural functions. 5, these are not really composite parts of human beings. These are just 5 processes which makes the appearance of a human living being and the world around. You can imagine how advanced this another perspective is. And the 5 khandhas, these 5 groups of existence, or how to call it, rupa, meaning the materiality, material phenomena, feeling, vedana, sanya, perceptions, sankharas, mental formations, and vijnana, sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. This together, in the flickery way, actually creates the appearance of me living my life in this world. And this is the situation for each being in samsara, almost each being in samsara. And there are different levels of these beings. We are the 5th from the bottom. There are many higher levels above all these devas. The deva, Tavatimsa I mentioned, Buddha was teaching Abhidhamma there, according to the tradition. So that's quite already a high level of deva, like angels, then the gods, then the immaterial spheres of existence. All these frequencies of existence are actually inhabited by this 5 khandhas groupings. It is the karma which keeps it together, and that's what we have. So when the Buddha spoke from the worldly perspective, he was using so-called samuti language. Samuti means the worldly. When he was talking from the nibbanic position of insight, to this language was given the name paramatta. Paramatta reality, worldly apparent reality, and the last reality, paramatta. And the Abhidhamma is actually the list, almost a laboratory list of these elements of the last reality. Therefore it is so strange. Therefore, from the human perspective, it makes hardly any sense. But the liberation, of course, comes from penetrating into this field of the paramatta. So not only the 5 khandhas are repeatedly mentioned by Buddha himself, he would also speak about 3 universal characteristics of everything which is conditioned. Everything is conditioned except nirvana. So everything actually has, in the last kind of penetration, these three universal characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta, unstable, not eternal, changeable, impermanent. The second, dukkha, means unsatisfactory, not really satisfying. Dukkha actually can go even to suffering. And the third one, anatta, means not self. There is no real self in anything. So this is the perspective from Nibbana. And of course, from this kind of insight, the humans which are so attached to these five khandhas, to the body and the mind, these four can be grouped together as a mind. Body and mind, five khandhas, and the humans are so attached to the body and to the mind. Usually not only attached, even identifying with that. And the high insight is revealing you are not yourself. Forget it. That's my little joke. So there is more. Also five khandhas, mind and body, Buddha speaks about it quite often. But this is already the high Dhamma. There is more. Buddha taught not only the Four Noble Truths, but also the dependent origination. And dependent origination is already a teaching of this Paramattha Dhamma, Paramattha Satcha, the higher or the ultimate truth. When the illusion of me and the world around is already penetrated, then the Paticcasamuppada is actually showing, almost in a modern scientific way, how is it possible that the samsara is running around endlessly. Samsara means endless running around in the rounds of rebirth. Always birth, living, death. Rebirth, living, death. So that Paticcasamuppada, there is more. One of the actually entries, the gates into this insight level, is the 12 ayatanas. I consider it to be the gate to get into the true Buddha's insight. 12 ayatanas means there are visual object and a visual organ. Audible object, sounds and ear, smell and nose, taste and tongue, touches and the surface of the body, and the heart and the ideas. In Buddha's time, the location, the organ for thoughts was the heart. We now believe it's more the brain. It's certainly more the brain, but some new ideas appear that even in the heart there are lots of neural activities. So let's take it as it was in the olden days, the heart being the organ for the mind. So 6 objects, 6 organs makes 12 ayatanas, but even better it is in the scope of 18 dhatus. 18 dhatus is the 12 ayatanas plus the 6 kinds of consciousness. Visual object, the visual organ, and the visual consciousness. 3 times 6 is 18. And this is exactly how we get into this level of insight which is necessary for final liberation. And it is this area of Buddha's teaching which was represented in the original quite well, but just mentioned, and this got enormous development in the Abhidhamma. So it seems that even in the Buddha's time, there have been a little bit confusion because Buddha did not really distinguish very clearly when he was teaching from the worldly kind of perspective and when he was teaching from the Paramattha perspective. So some confusion arose even then and there, because these realities, the apparent realities and the highest reality, are governed by different rules. So quite shortly after passing away of Buddha, the necessity arose to make it clear what is actually the worldly teaching, what is the high Dhamma teaching. And then it was clearly divided into Samuti Desana and Paramattha Desana, the worldly teaching and the Nibbanic teaching, let's call it this way. And now I can say what happened with this Nibbanic teaching. Abhidhamma talks about 4 last realities, 4 ultimate realities: Rupa, Chitta, Cetasika, Nibbana. The Nibbana is unconditioned. These 3 are still conditioned. Rupa, in this level of teaching, is no more substantial object or body. These are just processes. Rupa. Chitta, it's the mind, consciousness. In fact, there is only one consciousness, but in the Abhidhamma it is divided into different kinds of wholesome consciousness, unwholesome consciousness, jhanic consciousness, even lokutara, over-worldly, over-samsaric consciousness. That's Abhidhamma. And Cetasikas, I think there are 89 of kinds of consciousness. Cetasikas, this mental concomitants, it is usually translated. These are the admixtures to the consciousness, arising together with consciousness. And I think there are 50 something of Cetasikas. Nibbana is one, but could be understood as 2 kinds of nirvana. Kilesa Nirodha or Kanda Nirodha. That would be another talk. That doesn't matter. Now, for our purpose, I just want to say that this kind of development is the main difference from that what Buddha taught, and Theravada, the 250 years later, we can say like this, Forest tradition represents the original teaching. Burmese Buddhism represents the Theravadin teaching. I don't know about Sri Lankan Buddhism. I cannot say how it is there. But I was ordained in Burma, but living so long in forest tradition monasteries, so having some kind of openness and appreciation for everything which can help on the path of Dhamma. Now, this was somehow going through the years and through the decades of my lay life, of my monastic life. Don't forget, I was almost 20 years practicing as a layman, and I am only 30 years as a monk. So I have quite some kind of broadness of different approaches to practice of Buddha's path. And this was going somehow quite well. And perhaps this is the point I have to say. Another reminiscent memory from my first practice. I have a little bit unusual structure of my mind, because especially with the meditation object in-breath and out-breath, I was meditating anapanasati. So either I am aware of the process of in-breath, process of out-breath, or I am thinking, but nothing in between. almost nothing. So any kind of a slight thought actually for me means to lose the awareness of the in-breath and out-breath. And of course, these hours of to be alone in the cottage, thoughts, memories, everything popping up in the mind, and always catching the presence, bringing the awareness back, the mindfulness back to the feeling the in-breath and out-breath. So actually it was 3 months or 2 months and a half to be exact, of replacing the thoughts with the meditation object. Catching the wandering mind, catching even the thinking mind, and replacing it, bringing it back to perception of in-breath and out-breath. This is important introduction to that what I am going to read now. Because this is not long ago. I stopped teaching, so now I have more time to look in different sources of inspiration and also the original suttas. And also here in the monastery sometimes we are giving Dhamma talks, so a little bit preparing things like that. And I came also in the Anguttara Nikaya. Anguttara is one of the really original collections. It's a large one. It's a Anguttara 1, 302. If somebody wishes to look at the suttas. Actually, this is a passage in the Anguttara. These suttas are very short. It is just one paragraph. And there are many similar of these. Only one word is changed. But I am purposefully taking the 302 because it has a special graduation. These are about almost 8 suttas from 297 to 305 actually. Always exchanging one word only. But let me take this 302. Bhikkhus, there is one thing that, when developed and cultivated, leads exclusively to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. What is that one thing? Recollection of the devas. This is that one thing that, when developed and cultivated, leads exclusively to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Is this Buddhism at all? This was so surprising for me because it goes almost completely against my way of meditation. Contemplating devas, contemplating angels, contemplation, which means to think about, to generate some thoughts about and images about heavenly beings, and this will lead exclusively to nibbana and enlightenment. I could not believe that. As I said, purposefully I have chosen one of the most striking one, because as I said, only one word is changing. Actually, the 297 speaks, what is that one thing? Recollection of Dhamma. That is the one thing which, when reflected, developed, cultivated, leads exclusive, and so on. So there is a Dhamma, then comes Sangha, then comes Sila, virtuous behavior, then comes generosity, Chaga. That starts to be shaky, that by being generous, you can exclusively come to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, enlightenment, nibbana by generosity. But then comes the devas, recollection of devas. Then it continues, but it is said that these later actually have been added later. That the original anusati, these recollections, these reflections, have been only 6, those which I have now mentioned. So, recollection, this is the translation of Bhikkhu Bodhi, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Devas. I was looking in the Pali language, in original, in Pali, it is anusati. Anusati in dictionary, recollection, remembrance, memory, mindfulness of, thinking of, subject to be kept in mind. Now, this triggered a chain of reflection in my mind, that there was a shift, different approach to the meditation object. And this may be actually one of the largest shifts between the original and the Theravada. That Buddha, with these recollections, and not only recollections, there have been also the meditation of 32 parts of the body. You know, you cannot feel it, the intestines, the bladder, the livers, the stomach. And the meditation of 32 parts of the body is actually with closed eyes, more or less to imagine these organs. You cannot feel them. You can perhaps imagine the location of them within the body, but basically you are working with creations of the brain, with imaginations, and these recollections are conceptual activities of the brain to get inspired by these beautiful images, whatever you can imagine about the beauty and excellency of Dhamma, Sangha, Sila, and so. You know, I believe that then really you can almost connect with the purity. You can imagine and bring it into your heart and being very much inspired. I don't want to underestimate the power of anusati, of recollections. But as my nature is, and as the instruction in the Vipassana goes, to get beyond the thoughts to the direct perception of the experience as it evolves. Take the awareness of in-breath and out-breath. Still, you may have some talking going on during the awareness of in-breath and out-breath. And I believe this is the majority of meditators, that they actually have this inner self talking during the awareness of in-breath and out-breath, or rising and falling of the abdominal wall. In my case, not, because when I would be in thinking, I would not be aware of the meditation object rising, falling, or in-breath, out-breath. So for me, it was intuitively clear, if I want to practice really advanced Buddha's teaching, that I must get beyond the thoughts, to leave all the thoughts and thinking way down, and to wake up into this presence, actuality as it really is. And this seems to be the chief difference between the original teaching, which gives so much emphasis on these recollections or contemplations or whatever, but this is actually use of language in your mind. And the Abhidhamma goes completely beyond language, beyond concept. Now, this is the very deep difference between the original teaching and Theravada. Now, I have overdone it for the purpose of this talk to show the different accentuation, different emphasis in the practice. Of course, the knowledge of the teaching should be everywhere clearly, as much you need, get solid information from the books and lectures, whatever. But I'm talking about the practice. Now, sati is it is the seventh link of the Eightfold Noble Path. It is translated now usually as mindfulness, right mindfulness, sama sati. But in Buddha's time, the original meaning was probably really the original meaning, to remember what the Buddha said, to remember what I made clear for me, what I want to practice, to keep in mind this kind of recollections, this kind of application in the daily activities, to in the background of the mind, always to have the Buddha's instruction, to keep in mind the original meaning of the sati. Translated as mindfulness in the Theravada, and this is generally acknowledged English translation. I'm sure there was a reason for this. And it may be actually even recorded in the Badali Sutta, where Badali is approaching Buddha and he says, in the beginning there have been so many realizations and very few rules for the monks. Now we have only few realizations and many more monastic rules. Probably at that time it was 150 monastic rules during the Buddha's life. And Buddha explained it in the way, well, it is becoming large, so many monks ordained, some of the monks probably not really inspired by Dhamma only. There may be some social reasons for ordinations or like that. There is also quite a lot of respect and high esteem for monks. These are all things, and perhaps lots of support. This is all things which are more or less eroding the intensity of the pristine original inspiration. And if this was already during Buddha's life, you can expect even more when the Buddha passed away. And that the teachers were concerned, and they were looking for a new way of revival of this original intensity of practice, and that they have seen that the insight is actually one of the crucial things which are helping the detachment from the world, from the mind and body, from the five khandhas, and triggering the opening and enlightenment, so that they put more emphasis on developing insight, which in Buddha's time perhaps was not really so necessary, because people were intuitively opening up, in presence of Buddha. That there is not only that spoken communication coming into the field of Buddha, and plus his appearance, his worldly appearance, and his words, usually that was enough just to open up. And let's be clear that that different people need a different intensity of practice, even different stage of practice to open up. There are recorded in the scriptures that some of the peoples opened up after few sentences. The paramis of these people, the good karma was so supporting the opening, it happened very easily. In my understanding, sometimes it is not by chance that the people are reborn then and there, in that time, in that area, to get into this field. So that would be my explanation why in Buddha's time so many people open up so quickly. But it is even in the tradition that different people need different intensity of practice to open up. And quite some people need many, many lifetimes to open up. And indeed, at the beginning, my image was, well, this is so enormous task to get completely liberated. It's impossible to do it in one lifetime. But if I am really resolute, using all the energy of this life, even the negative tendencies in my mind, I will not just kind of deny that. I will melt it and use it for even the energy behind the negativities of mind, just to change the polarity and use even that. In my mind was to use it to refine that energy behind it, to employ that in the way of this positive, the wholeness, using the wholeness possible for the practice. But the image was, no, one time I can just make foundation, 100 lifetimes, perhaps 1,000 lifetimes. Doesn't matter. I go. That was my resolution. So this is definitely truth, that some people need just some touches of the Dhamma and already starting to open up, and other people must go deep into inside, even more and even more, before they open up. So this idea of the Theravada to fully implement the field of insight, I regard it, for me personally, it is a correct one. And if I have to choose between the original or the Theravadins, I go for Theravada. Because for me, the insight is really the leading kind of practice, which I go for. What it is, the insight. I indicated that you have to go beyond the appearance of things and see the things as they really are. This paramattha level. Probably the best topography of this is the Upanishad Sutta. I have this graphic image of this Upanishad Sutta. It was done by Aganyani, a German nun. I changed a little bit, made it my way, but actually it is so good, this Upanishad Sutta, because it shows our normal predicament of unenlightened living around and around and around, circling around in samsaric rebirth. That's the paticca samuppada, that's the dependent origination. And this Upanishad Sutta is showing the possibility to use either the inspiration or the suffering of this life to be inspired and to get to follow the Buddha's instruction and to practice towards the liberation. Liberation is in the top. And these are the different stages of practice, how the Buddha is giving it. It's quite interesting. Starting with faith, that first you have to have some solid faith into Buddha's teaching. That leads to gladness. Translation of Pamoja is gladness. That may lead to enthusiasms, really rapturous mind. Opens up a deep tranquility. The mind is open and very, very unified, tranquil. That triggers sukha, the great bliss and happiness of pure mind. And the meditation may go into jhanic absorptions, jhanic concentrations, collectedness of mind. And this is meant really a meditative state of focus and purity and penetration. And then it happens. Using this purity and clarity of mind takes the curtain, how the things appear to a human being. It penetrates this appearance and goes and sees the things as they really are. And this is the crucial insight, yata bhuta jnana dasana, as the things really are. And this is the crucial part of the Vipassana meditation. Here, actually, this is the Vipassana meditation. This leads to, here is translated into revulsion. That's a translation of Bhikkhu Bodhi. Kind of having enough of that all. And that triggers the viraga, the dispassion. And that goes to vimutti and the liberation. So this Upanishad Sutta is beautiful in them that here we have actually quite clearly given by Buddha the stages which are necessary for a complete, if somebody needs really the full path of the insight, so it is this path towards liberation. So here we are at the Yata Bhuta Jnana Dasana as a crucial part of the path, and this is also very much a practice in Vipassana. Vipassana is actually tuned. Vipassana means just this. Vipassana is the highest way of practice. But of course, if you practice that without any foundation, by good karma, by moral life, by sufficient education in the Buddha's teaching, by the purity of mind, all these stages of samadhi. So it is incomplete practice. And really, I practiced so much in the direction of Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. It is a powerful way, but it's incomplete. So still I am recommending it by all means, because it may trigger things. Many people have benefited from that very much. And even if you don't benefit very much, I met hardly anybody who would regret to take 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 months of Vipassana. So recommending it, but don't, on the other side, don't over-evaluate, even if you have some great openings, don't over-evaluate. It is not the only area to work on. Even this worldly kind of life needs to be worked out. Certainly with the help, if you have some higher opening, it will be easier to purify the normal situations of lay life and so. It's true that in the original Buddha's teaching, if we look at the kind of development, Buddha would like to see the people to ordain. So he would actually like to see the people outside of the normal worldly business, and then helping with the monastic discipline to get already considerable power and control over the contents of the mind, cultivating the contents of the mind, of the thoughts, and then, of course, practicing for the highest. Now, in the modern time, having the ordinary life as it is and jumping into the Vipassana practice for 2 weeks and going back, still it's a kind of a purification, even if it is temporary. Something accumulates in the back of your mind. It is not lost. So be sure that I am supporting with all might the original Buddha's path and with all might the modern Theravada approach. In this way of Vipassana, Burma has, of course, a traditional monkhood, which, of course, has developing the traditional way as well. It is only here in the West when the Burmese monastic tradition is hardly represented. So just to bring it to the kind of correct understanding. But now I want to say something very advanced. Until now it was could be actually for everybody who is interested in Dhamma, in practice of meditation, Vipassana or whatever. This was quite universal and in detail. Now there is something more which I want to say, and this is quite advanced. And it's for those who are the specialist of Dhamma. Feinschmecker. The gourmands of Dhamma. But be careful, it goes steep. I mentioned the sutta already, Rohitasa Sutta, where the Buddha is declaring that the world is in this, it goes like, in this fathom long body with its feeling, perception and intellect, I declare the world, the beginning of the world, the cessation of the world, the path leading towards the cessation of the world. It is an enormously strange sutta. And as I said, for a very long time, I had some inklings what it is, because there is another sutta, like the Pena Sutta, which is Samyutta Nikaya 2295, where Buddha is describing the 5 khandhas, which are the constituents of a human being, or any being actually. The body, the materiality, Buddha compares to foam. You see, so this is the first clear indication that what we perceive as a material, substantial world around me and my body, that it is empty of substance or solidity. That the solidity is only a function, but not something really material, hard. That hardness is only function, but these are the tools. The mind is creating the image of the solid objects, of the so-called material objects around me. That far I could understand it. That actually the world is not that what it appears to be. And this is the basic teaching in all advanced spiritual directions. That we are living in illusion. Or better to say, in appearances. That what the brain creates out of these sensory impingements. Because let's be clear that the solidity and the substantial world is created mainly by seeing out of the visual images and of the sensory impingements, the touches, the smell, even the sound is actually rupa. Now, that was somehow clear that the world is not that what it appears to us. But to declare that even the stars, the sun, the whole world is in this fathom-long body, that was still difficult for me to take. Atom bomb explosion is enormous energy. So even if you take it as an appearance, the energy is enormous. How it could be in my body? Get the lesson once again, because I repeat it on all occasions. Now, let's go down to the scientific understanding, purely scientific understanding of our world. The sun is not radiating light. The sun is radiating electromagnetic waves of different wavelengths. This is the truth, which is quite scientifically described here on the scale, starting with the cosmic rays, which are extremely short, That's the size of subatomic particles, so that these rays are actually going through the Earth unhindered. Then a little bit longer are the gamma rays, that's the atomic explosion. A little bit longer are X-rays, which can penetrate the soft tissue of the body. We can see the bones. Then we have ultraviolet light. We call it light, but it is actually electromagnetic radiation. It can burn our skin when we are in the sun too long. Then there are different frequencies of electromagnetic waves around the half micron, that's about 500 nanometers. These are electromagnetic waves, nothing about light. These are electromagnetic waves. And it continues into infrared. You know, we will feel it as a warmth, but basically these are infrared, and then it continues with the microwaves, the handies, the radios, the radar, the television. You know, these are all electromagnetic waves. And some are penetrating, like the radio waves are penetrating my head, the television waves as well. I have no knowledge about it. So some of the electromagnetic waves are reflected. They are not really penetrating, they are reflected from different objects, and they disperse, and they even are coming through the lens in the eye to the retina. The retina has a sensitive cells, the rods and the cones. And there are 4 types of these cells, and they are sensitive to very particular wavelengths of these electromagnetic waves. And if that particular wavelength is arriving at the sensitive part of these cells, they are generating a chemical-electrical signal, which is probably a little bit pre-processed in the eye, but basically it goes as a chemo-electric impulse into the visual center of the brain. There is nothing about light, nothing about colors. These are electrochemical impulses or patterns of impulses. And now the huge neuronal function in the brain visual center begins. Dividing these different frequencies into contours and running through the database of previous experiences, recognizing similar experiences from the past, taking it, probably this is this stage when the impulses, electrochemical impulses, change into colors, and in this form it goes into the first processing by sanya, by perception. The most important part from this talking, please listen carefully. The most important part of this is that this whole thing is happening completely unconsciously. Perhaps even the first processing by sanya is still in the subliminal consciousness, and what we get in conscious to be aware of is the product of the neurons. And only in this stage I see a camera, I see a light, I see a tree, I see a window. Please take good lesson from this. The same thing is happening with our thoughts. They pop out of impulses. In spiritual language you would say the sankharas are actually karmic impulses. That would be the vipaka of the previous karma. And these are the impulses which are coming into the neuronal functions. The neurons will make kind of a story out of it. It goes into the perception, and then it goes in, only after this it goes into the consciousness, I think that, and the sanya, the last stage of the sanya, always gives the footprint on it, me. I see, I want, I decide, I smell something, I hear, I would, I wish, I remember, I'm planning. Who is doing these decisions? The neurons. All decisions in our life are happening in the neuronal activities of the brain. Then it goes into the result of this neuronal function goes into, in the last stage, into the consciousness. Then it gets the fingerprint, me, I decided, I see. The whole idea of me is illusion. It's an additional, counterproductive function of the sanya, of the perception. It's very interesting that Buddha, in the Anatta Sutta, one of his first discourses, is telling exactly that. These are impersonal processes. Our life is impersonal mainly. Our life is, let's say, 85% happening. And this is the difference. In uninstructed people, the life is happening 99%. They have not really even wish to do something about it. What they are living is the life of their neurons. And they think that they are living their lives. But they are living in this illusion. There is a self in the world. The real world is in the mind, in this body, as Buddha said. We are living in neuronal creations, and the mind is projecting it outwards as the world. This is the big one. And that Buddha is telling that 2,500 years ago, that we are actually living in virtual reality. Even the energy is virtual. My problem is the atom bomb and the amount of energy when supernova explodes. Where is the energy? No. Just information. Actually, Buddha does not speak about information. He speaks about conditions, net of conditioning. So unreal is the samsara. And so real is the samsara. Because the consequences, we live the consequences of all that, of the attachments, of the identifications. To wake up from this, that's the big one. So, in the spiritual, another spiritual directions like Hinduism, they speak about Maya, the cosmic illusion. It is very similar to this, but still in the Hinduism, if I know it well enough, there is this Om as a very ground basic vibration. Vibration is still energy. I think we have to go even beyond that. In the modern time, it's for us imaginable that everything is only information, which is completely immaterial, not energetic. Something like that. Is it crucial for liberation? Yes and no. As I said, it's different. Some people need really a full-scale insight into the anicca, dukkha, anatta. One thing I still have to say, talking about the brain and its functions. Everything is happening in the neuronal functions, and only the last stage is the consciousness. This is the kind of a picture from the modern neurology. That actually consciousness is just like the icing on the cake of the brain. And thin one, very thin one. That the majority actually of the functions just happen in the neurons. Now, if you go to the structure of Buddha's teaching, and especially in Vipassana, and especially in Theravada and Abhidhamma, that it is not at all concerned with the contents of your experience, of your living. It is focused on the process, how it is happening. And in this neuronal picture of the brain functions, it would mean that you are completely detached of the contents of your experience. It is completely unimportant what are you thinking, what are you seeing, what are you hearing or sensing. The focus, the awareness is enlarged a little bit into the stage when from the neurons, the final stages, it goes into the consciousness. This last stage, before you identify with the contents. Insight meditation is trying through detachment to be completely disinterested in the contents of your life experience and going to the structure, how it is happening, how the impulses, the sankharas, these impulses from the neurons, how it is entering into the consciousness. This stage, you need to get conscious, the awareness to enlarge or move a little bit into the early stage of your experience. There it is, the anicca, dukkha, anatta, so evidently. There it goes. Like I had one experience in the first meditation. Unfortunately, it lasted perhaps only 15 seconds and never came back in that intensity. When you experience each of these impulses into consciousness, in my case perhaps 5, maximum 7 per second, 7 impulses or 5 impulses per second, per each second. The experience was, each was very different from the another one, and actually there was a kind of a germ of I already in it. So with each of these moments, there was a kind of a birth and dying. Then there was microscopic gap, and then another coming and dying, coming, dying, coming, dying. You know. It was important experience, even such a short one, unfortunately, to see how the brain is functioning, and also the function of santati. Santati is the brain function to smoothen it out and to give the appearance of a smooth life experience, sitting here, looking there, hearing this, wanting this. Not everybody needs to go that far. What is really necessary is to get beyond the idea of self, to see clearly that the life is happening, 85-90%. And as I said, the uninformed people, the life is really just happening. It's just a neuronal functions mostly. Against those who are already on the path of Dharma practice, where the space for kind of a steering the life is increasing. The mindfulness, application of mindfulness towards the 5 khandhas, towards the mind and body, when you are a little bit cutting the full identification with your body and mind, you are creating some space where your wisdom can come in and take the lead. I cannot imagine better end to this talk. That's the gap is bigger and bigger, that our growing wisdom of our heart can steer our life towards our liberation.